Okay, it's that time again, y'all. I am still sick, but we're still gonna go again with our 10-minute story times. So, I am wearing the same shirt because this is my pajama. Don't come for me, okay? I'm in bed, ready to go. It's actually past our time because I wanted to get this started right at that little dusky glow. It's almost 8 o'clock right now, so, anyways, we're gonna get started with where we are and let's not waste any time. Okay, I'm gonna start a paragraph before just so that we can, gather ourselves. My name is Sulan. Please help me. Here is my husband. The woman pulls forward a man. We are not from Beijing. We arrived just last week. The nurse pushes past. A shudder moves up her neck. It's not that she has never been accosted for help in the halls of this hospital before. No, something disturbing cuts through this woman's voice. A desperation so bare, it's indecent. The nurse does not take a good look at the couple, but she has the impression that they are handsome and well dressed. City people, even if they aren't from Beijing. Not in any case the type of people who should beg. 6 of 10 beds in the pre-delivery suite are empty, along with the delivery room itself. In the operating rooms, the first cesarean has begun. The nurse slips in and waits, preparing identification tags and linens as blood-soaked cloths line the floor. Then the baby is out, a boy, and he is in the nurse's arms on his way to the nursery before the surgeon's needle has begun to mend his mother's wound. In the nursery there is just one window, a small rectangular carved high in the wall. A small rectangle carved high in the wall. Some mornings the sun reaches through on its way to noon and fills the room with light. The faces of the newborns become so bright that the nurses can't stand to look at them. The sun passes quickly, but in the minutes before the room returns to bare fluorescence, everything inside insists so badly on its life that she must look at her shoes in embarrassment. This day is cloudy. Light presses on a sheet of gray. The nurse looks into the glow and tries to replace the images in her mind with the same static colorlessness. But one persists. The blank-faced woman, her moving lips. My name's Sulan. Please help me. In a flash, she sees the husband pulled forward, his pupils narrowed, his lips thin. The nurse shakes her head. Briefly, she wonders why the couple came to Beijing, if they were drawn by the same excitement as other young people flooding the city. She picks up a boy who has begun to howl. She prepares to return him to his mother. When the injured came, the nurse is bathing an infant. It is past midnight, and her shift is ended. Instead of standing in the nursery wiping dried amniotic fluid from this newborn's red skin, she should be at home, facing the wall and trying to sleep. No replacements have arrived. She does not mind. Walking through the corridors, passing under open windows, she has heard muffled commotion straining the walls. She is not eager to push home through all that. She dips a cloth in the warm water, washes and dries the infant, checks the tag on the foot. On the tag she reads, Sulan, a familiar name. Before she can place it, a yellow-green flash lights the window. Then a human noise hurtles into her ears, and in her eyes it is the woman from the morning, mouth in the shape of a scream. The nurse stands still, holding Sulan's daughter in both hands. The daughter begins to cry. The door opens, her colleague with another child. In the moment before the door swings shut, shouting in the hallway outside. God, her colleague says. His mother was just pushing him out when right into the delivery room. They? I've got to go, her colleague says, and hands the newborn to the nurse, who quickly wraps the new arrival and sets him under the lamp. All around the nurse, the newborns are crying, red faces pinched against white cloth, wet lips open wide. All but Sulan's girl, who has suddenly grown quiet, silent herself. She picks up the child. She knows it cannot see her. The newborn brain understands shapes and light, but cannot process images farther than 2 lengths of a hand away. Still, she watches the child watch her, wondering what it dares her to do. Bodies are lining up in the halls. They come on cardboard, stretched between two bicycles, on the flat beds of watermelon carts, in the arms of shouting strangers. A man in blue pants with a wound in his gut lies coiled on an unhinged door, hand curled around the knob. Mattresses are improvised, IVs inserted with bare hands. Nurses triage while wrapping wounds. An off-shift doctor runs through the gate. Trails of blood dry on the floor. In the morgue, volunteers step between bamboo mats, preparing a list of names. The delivery unit's operating rooms have been taken over by urgent care. Scalpels that earlier extracted babies now extract bullets. Tens of beds in the pre-delivery suite are occupied, along with the floor space between them, by the wounded, waiting. New and expecting mothers are moved into 2 rooms on the top floor. Their families trail behind, looking at their feet. The mothers are silent as they're wheeled through the halls. Some pretend not to see. Some close their eyes and pray. Sulan sits up with her eyes red and open, staring coldly into the faces of the wounded. The nurse stands in the center of the nursery, not knowing what to do. She has stood here for hours, checking vitals, preparing birth certificates, listening to waves of clamor erupt beyond the walls and ceilings and floors. 2 more newborns have been brought in, the first by an overnight nurse from the inpatient building, who tells her the maternity ward move, the second by a teenage girl who calls herself a volunteer. The nursery is running out of space. By now, over half the babies should be back with their families, but no one has come to stay, and the nurse cannot leave any newborns unattended. She checks temperatures and heart rates again. There have been no major complications all night. No early babies the size of her palm, no blue-skinned babies whose lungs need coaxing to breathe. Death, she thinks, is elsewhere occupied. She digs in the closet for the largest supply cart with the high sides she can find. Syringes and boxes of gauze clatter to the floor. She pulls out the cart and presses her hands and arms on the metal trays to warm them. She pads the top and bottom layers with linens. In this way, she squeezes all but 1 newborn onto the cart. She straps Sulan's daughter to her chest. The girl starts crying as she pushes the cart out the door. The hall stinks. Bodies lie perpendicular to the wall, bleeding and burned black. The nurse has seen plenty of blood and should not be surprised by it. In the operating room, she has learned to disassociate blood from the human. But these people are not inside an operating room, and their blood does not seem natural, material, like flesh or bone, but rather like a too human thing. It is almost pretty. The nurse looks at the people along the wall and sees their blood as a painter sees paint, coloring in who they are. She pushes the cart through the hall. The living look up, blinking at what she brings. The makeshift maternity ward is a mess of beds and chairs. Cots crammed in every space, families squatting on the floor. The nurse enters the first room with her cart. New parents and grandparents sit up and crane their necks. They catch their joy and hold it close, afraid or ashamed to hope. Outside it is finally quiet. For the first time in months, the adjacent street is deserted. The nurse picks up the newborns and reads off the mothers' names. Families come forward and collect their babies one by one. When her cart is empty, she calls out the name Sulan. There is no response. She sees a woman alone in the corner cot, a body turned to the wall. She unwraps the girl from her chest and walks over. She sits at the edge of the bed and waits. Finally, the woman turns. Again, the nurse is fascinated by her face, how each feature, taken alone, is plain and unmemorable. The small, single-lidded eyes, the straight nose, the pale lips. It is attractive, but not pretty. Not quite, and it strikes the nurse that it would be a good face for an actress, the kind of face that could become anything with just a few lines of makeup, that, like a mirror, reflects the viewer back upon herself. Sulan's eyelids are swollen, her eyes glassy. She looks at the nurse and says, "Do you believe in time?" "Time? Do you believe," Sulan continues, "that the past is gone and the future does not yet exist?" For a moment the nurse is quiet. Then she says, "Yes." Sulan stares. She begins to scream. The screams are short and breathy and sound like a repeating mechanical alarm. The nurse covers the daughter's ears. Someone else's mother-in-law leans over. Sulan has been hysterical all night, calling for her husband. Apparently she begged the doctors to let him inside the delivery unit, but of course this was impossible. Afterward, the man could not be found. The mother-in-law lowers her voice and looks meaningfully at the nurse. She says, "When was the last time you saw Yunfu at the hospital all alone?" A woman, all alone. The nurse wants to touch her. She wants to cover the screaming mouth and soothe the damp hair from the face. She wraps the daughter to her chest and stands to leave. Her legs buckle. She sits back down. For a moment, she feels her exhaustion. She has not slept in over 24 hours. In over 20 hours. She has not eaten in 10. She shakes her shoulders and stands again, breathing slowly, and heads for the second maternity room. In the second room are women in labor, and one who just arrived. Heaven knows how. Well, guys, that is it. I'm sorry it's getting so dark. I should do this earlier, but I hope you guys had fun, and we're going to find out more about this story. I hope you guys are excited. I'm going to try. I did better with not messing up, but I'm going to try and keep working at it. So hang in there with me, and I will see you tomorrow.